On today's episode of the Retro Gamers Podcast, John Story returns to co-host and discuss video game prices in the past, as well as shareware on PCs in the 80s and 90s. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Retro Gamers Podcast, episode 413. Anthony here, and rejoining me this episode is John. John, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Always happy to have you. You know that, and I really appreciate you swinging over. And what I like when you come and do the podcast with me, it's in person. We actually get to sit next to each other and talk, which I don't get to do all the time.
It's nice to actually be in the same space, I think.
Yeah, as long as you got your 18 inches, right? There's
that's
that
true.
Whole personal space thing.
Well, you're from New York City.
Which you're encroaching.
You're from New York City, so that's closer, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's closer. It doesn't mean you gotta like it.
That's true. Wow. Okay.
But anyway, welcome back. You've encroached my space already. We're already too close.
I'm sorry.
No, get back in frame. But welcome back. And you weren't. It wasn't that long ago that you were here. We were talking edutainment games.
Edutainment. I bring you the most, I think, potentially boring topics, and I try to find some way to put a
I find that
good spin on it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I find that you do make the topics very interesting, especially with one like that. Like that one, I was worried about. I was personally worried about that one, but I kind of had fun talking about it. Yeah. And then I live streamed Mario is Missing, and I'm like, oh yeah, I was like, talking about it could be interesting. Playing them, totally different story.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well, true.
Yeah.
Sometimes our memories of the past are better.
Always better
than actually what they are if you try the game out today or the experience out.
Absolutely. And I highly recommend not playing Mario's Missing, by the way.
I've ruined so many memories of 80s television shows I grew up with.
I
thought were amazing, and I've gone back and watched, and wow, they do not hold up, most of them.
Not only that, but when you're younger, you don't realize the formula to those shows. At least I didn't when I was a kid, and now as a grown up, like you can watch one episode of Three's Company. You can watch one episode of Perfect Strangers. They all do the same exact beat. Over and over and over again.
Same beat, a lot of the same threats. Like as a kid, I would have sworn that I would have died by killer bees or like a
refrigerator.
What was the big one? They always had someone falling into the quicksand.
Yes, the quicksand.
Yes, you don't see quicksand anymore.
There's no more. Yeah,
as an environmental threat.
No, it's not. There's so many other environmental threats now. Now it's like cyberbullying and things like that. Like
I guess in some ways it's a lot worse.
Yeah, I was gonna say you find an equivalent, right?
It's true.
As time goes on.
Sorry, way off topic.
Okay, way off topic. Getting back to video games. So before we get into our topic for today, John, normally I ask people that join the show like what have they been playing, but it's I think a more interesting conversation to have is what have you been buying? Because I know you buy a lot of stuff for your collection.
I do. I've gotten a number of. So this is actually something that's very interesting. I have a lot of original Macintosh computers, like the Macintosh Plus, the SE. The Macintosh came out in 1984. There's a very famous. It's a great commercial that came out in 1984, and it was directed by Ridley Scott, of all people, right?
Nice.
And so it was a huge campaign, and the Macintosh was famous for like essentially being the first kind of commercial computer that hit big with a graphical user interface and a mouse, and it was huge. What I've always wanted in my collection was one of the original Macintosh computers from 1984, what they ended up calling the Macintosh 128K. And the reason they called it because it had 128 kilobytes of RAM, which as it turned out was barely enough to run the operating system. So it was a pretty crippled computer when it sold. It didn't necessarily sell in huge numbers. However, I picked one up locally for like $100.
Nice.
And it is an exceptionally rare computer. And then I looked up the serial number for it, and it's like the 2500. So very, very low number.
Oh, wow.
And the best part is it just works. So I'm still gonna recap it. The analog board, the board that drives the monitor and the power supply, it always needs recapping new capacitors. So I have my friend Bastion, who will be recapping that for me. But that's my biggest new purchase. And the other new purchase I got, I can't remember the name of the device offhand, but I got this little handheld device that has analog inputs. And I have a lot of computers and consoles that essentially output composite or S video. And this will take that and automatically convert it, I believe, to MPEG-4. I think that's the codec it uses, and
Right.
it'll upscale it too, I believe. The
That's great, though.
reviews look pretty solid, and that way I don't have to have a computer as a go-between. It's all one device, and I'll put it on USB or SD card. So those are my two kind of big purchases.
Those are good purchases. That's great. Nice Macintosh from '84.
Yeah.
I wish you the best of luck with that.
Yeah,
Hopefully it doesn't implode.
No, it should be fine.
No, I'm sure.
It should be fine.
My purchasing the past couple of weeks has been pretty minimal, but I just got back from another trip to Canada, which I love to do, and when I go there, I always go thrifting. That's my thing. I go to the thrift stores. I see what they're selling, because not only is it great to find things, but the price difference, the price difference between Canada and the US is always great. So everything I buy there is about 25% off when I do the actual pricing. So, which is great. But I only got a couple of things this time around, because there wasn't a lot of stuff that jumped out at me. And since I was recently talking about 25th anniversaries. There were a good number of anniversaries this year. Mario's turning 40 in September. We just had the 45th anniversary for Pac-Man in May. And earlier this year, I think it was in February, it might be February 3rd, if I'm not mistaken, we had the 25th anniversary of The Sims. And just a tie-in for that, Old School Gamer magazine, which I write for on occasion, I just wrote an article for the 25th anniversary of The Sims. So,
Okay.
And that'll be coming out in the next issue. I think it's July, if not it's August. I'm not 100% sure when it's coming.
Is this digital and in print?
It's digital and print, yeah.
Okay.
So like I have some of the print. I actually signed up for it before I started writing for them, but I get the print copies because I just love having the actual print copies, which is great. But my subscription includes the digital version as well. But you can just sign up for the digital version. But when I was at the thrift store, I had to pick these up because it was, in my head now it's been all about The Sims, but they had the Live in Large expansion pack. And I got all these I got this for like $3. $3 American, which is great. So I got the Sims Live in Large, and I got the Sims Making Magic expansion pack. I believe I have the original, like the actual Sims game. So if I throw all of that on my nice little PC back here, I can actually play them all. And I don't know if you remember, like the discs here, like at a certain point for PC, because it used to take so many discs to like install something, they have like these thicker, longer ones in case like you need. I think this was set up for like 4 discs if you needed it. But like Making Magic was actually a 2-disc expansion.
They were reluctant to sell games on DVD for a while when they were still selling physical media, because for a long time people had just CD-ROMs in their computers.
Yes. Oh yeah, that's right. I remember. So I got the 2 Sims packs, and then I saw this sitting there, and I just had to add it to my collection. I grabbed Diablo 3. They had Diablo 3 just sitting there.
I played through that on my PS3, and it was an enjoyable game. I know some people didn't like 3. I enjoyed it. Yeah.
I think I bought 3. Oddly enough, I think I bought 3 around the time 4 came out, because my friends were all getting 4, but they said, like, I've never played a real Diablo game. I really haven't.
Really?
So no, I don't know. It was one of those ones that kind of slipped by me.
The first 2 are on a PC, very, very.
Yeah, but you know why? Because I was playing Baldur's Gate instead of Diablo. That's where my focus was on my PC.
I did spend a lot more time on Baldur's Gate.
Yeah. So I saw Diablo 3 sitting there, and I just said, you know what? Let me grab this. I know it's out on like PS3. I think it's on 360.
I think they put it on everything.
Yeah, I think they put it on everything. But I just thought it would be nice to add to the collection, so I added Diablo 3. And that's all that I grabbed this time around. Normally, I come back with a home. I grabbed some VHS tapes too to fill out some stuff. I found Raiders of the Lost Ark. I was missing it from the trilogy, so I grabbed that while I was there. Yeah. And Moonstruck, which should be in everybody's collection.
So, as you know, John Pratt from Capital Region Electronics Recycling,
Yeah.
I'm going to be helping him at the Long Island Expo, Retro Gaming Expo in August.
Yes.
And one of the things we've got this year, for whatever reason, is an enormous amount of VHS movies. Like, I filled an entire pallet up to like 5 feet tall with boxes of just
VHS?
VHS movies.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Oh, there'll
Can
be
I-
quite a few movies as well as like computers.
That's like
and
a
consoles
that's
and
like a
gaming
Scrooge
stuff.
McDuck scenario. Can I like go in and go swimming in it? You know, the way
Yeah.
he used to swim through coins.
There's hundreds, hundreds and hundreds.
I would have a field day with that if I had a place to put them all. That's my biggest problem.
You should just build some shelving.
Yeah, don't get into that. Yeah. And for those of you who, as he brings that up, for anybody who pays attention to, our Facebook page and things like that, I did post a couple of weeks ago that I was rebuilding my game closet shelves because I was using something temporary and it left very little room for movement. And I posted something and I said, I should have an update by Friday. That's my plan to get it done. That was 2 weeks ago, I think, or at least a week ago. Or no, it's about 2 weeks ago. So clearly I'm not done yet. This is definitely taking much longer than I had planned, but I will post photos and stuff once it's done. And not the in-between moments, because I don't think you need to see me raging as I'm building these
It's
things.
a learning process for you.
Yes, I have learned never to build anything else again.
So what kind of saw would you say you don't cut wood with?
You don't cut wood with a jigsaw.
Mm-hmm.
No, wait, not a jigsaw. What did I buy?
You bought a hacksaw.
I bought a hacksaw on recommendation from somebody else.
He says that you didn't listen closely.
No, that's not true. That is not true. But it's totally true.
A hacksaw is definitely, for listeners out there, not what you would use to cut wood.
But I will say the jigsaw I bought worked nicely. So
It's okay.
So that's that. So I'm okay. I am okay. And then Lowe's was nice enough to cut everything else for me. So there you go. But anyway, I'll have updates on that. But enough about DIY for the insane. Let's talk about some retro news before we get into our topic. And I have a few bits here that I want to share. The first one goes out to anybody who likes to game on their Android or iOS. And I just so happen to come across this. But there are some Sega games that are available for download on Android and iOS that are gonna get delisted soon, and they're available just for free. So if you like to game on your phone, there are a bunch of Sega games you may want to grab before they disappear. And these again are free to play. All you have to do is install them into your phone after they get delisted.
And no advertisements.
There'll be no
advertisements,
nothing.
and I believe that most, if not all of them, will support controllers, Bluetooth controllers.
Yes.
So
they'll do all of that, and again, once you download it, it will just stay on your phone and you can play it.
And there's some heavy hitters in here.
And there are some heavy hitters. So I'm going to just read through the list really quickly. So we have Crazy Taxi Classic, Streets of Rage 2, again, the classic versions, Super Monkey Ball Sakura Edition, Virtua Tennis Challenge, Golden Axe Classics, Shining Force Classics, which I would throw on my phone, but I would never do anything else with my phone but play Shining Force. Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 2, and Sonic CD Classic, which Sonic CD to me was such a great game, and so many people did not.
There's so many people do not like it.
There's so many people that don't like it. I
love it.
I love that game. I love that game. And Sega CD, that was like the game to get if you had a Sega CD.
That is a hole in my collection.
That
I definitely need Sega CD.
I still have the Sega CD or the Sonic CD.
I'm sorry, I have a Sega CD. I need Sonic CD.
I have Sonic CD, but I don't know if I have it. I think I may have it in the sleeve that it came in. If I don't, I just have the disc itself. But I do have Sonic CD in my collection. Of course, it's all kind of scratched, but
as is often.
But it still runs. But it still runs, which is nice because I did try it on my I didn't try it on my Sega CD after Jack fixed it, but I played it on my JVC XI.
I have one of those.
Yes.
Nice.
I grabbed that 4.5 years ago
Okay.
at a store in St. Louis when I was visiting a friend. I had never seen it before.
Okay.
And it was sitting there, and I was like, okay. And it was price, I don't know if you want to call it price. At the time, I paid $250 for it, and I was like, you know what? I go, I've never seen this before. I want to just, I'll add it to my collection. I'll splurge a little bit. Now online, I see people selling it for like $700-800.
There were times, I think it was like 10 or 15 years ago, I looked at this. I wanted that, and I
Mhm.
wanted the Pioneer Laserdisc player that had the modules. Are you
Oh,
familiar
yeah.
with this? So one of the modules that you could plug in would let you play PC TurboGrafx 16 games.
Yep.
Both, I believe, the cards, the Hue cards, and the CD.
And the CD. Yeah.
And then they had a Sega CD, which was far more common, the Sega
Yep.
CD one. But I love Laserdisc, as you know.
I do
would
know that.
love to get a hold of one of those, but I could have gotten them when I first found out about this for like a couple $100, and I was like, it seems like a lot of money. And now, if you can, if you go out to eBay and look for them, they're ridiculous.
They're insanely expensive. Yeah. I know. Funny, when I was at the thrift store in Canada, I almost picked up, just for the fun of it, they had an HD DVD player in box somebody left there. Not brand new.
We have one at the warehouse.
Yeah, but it was sitting in box, and I was like, ooh.
Oh, for the Xbox.
No.
Oh,
An actual HD DVD player.
Yep.
And I was like, I would love to just add this to my collection. And then I'm like, wait a minute. I go, where am I going to put it? And then I just didn't buy it. So
yeah.
It's like, but yeah, so for anybody who wants those Sega classic games on your phone, grab them now before they go away. Because as of this recording, they're still available. Hopefully they'll still be there when you hear about this if you want to grab them.
Yeah, I grabbed all of them.
There you go. I'm now that I know about it, I'm going to download them too.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like I said, my phone will be useless to me except for playing video games. Moving on. So, Final Fantasy Tactics, 32-bit classic, originally released on the PlayStation 1. There's been news that they're going to be doing a remastered version of it. It's been confirmed. The rumors were confirmed. There's going to be a remastered version of this game. And the Tactics game plays like, again, one of my other favorite games, Shining Force, where it's like you're moving pieces on the board when you're battling and stuff. Really, really cool game. Arguably on many, many, many lists as one of the best games to be released on the PlayStation 1. But just a bit of news came out about this game because they were they interviewed the director of the Tactics, Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles. And when they interviewed him, they were talking about the game and remastering it. And he had pointed out, he's like, the reason why it's been so challenging to remaster the game is because they don't have the original source code to the PlayStation 1 game.
That's such a common problem. And it boggles the mind that you would put this much energy into, as a team, building a commercial game and then just be like, all right, let's throw the source code away now. I don't understand that. It just never makes sense.
Yeah, and it's not unfamiliar though for the times back in the 90s and early 2000s where they just never worried about preserving anything. So it's just like they made the game, they released it, off it goes. They'll never need it again.
It's a story as old as time. You hear it over and over.
Yeah, you never think of it.
We threw away the source code.
Yeah, we threw away the source code. One of the other ones that, and then while reading this article I saw on Time Extension, like one of the other ones that was also like infamous for this was the Panzer Dragoon series, which also they did not save the source code for, and that's probably one of the reasons why Panzer Dragoon is it Saga or there's Panzer Dragoon Saga on like the Sega Saturn. Like if you want a copy of that game. It's like $2,000.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's insane. But again, one of those games where they don't have the source code for it anymore. So it's just a little interesting tidbit about that. And I'm like, yeah, it to me, like hearing these stories makes me realize too also how important video game preservation is today and how many places are trying to preserve, like the Video Game Museum and all of these places, they're trying to preserve all of these old games. And it's not about skirting around the original owners of the game or the licenses. It's just for the sake of preserving.
I do think though that a lot of the games source codes that are missing, including potentially this one, they're not necessarily missing. It's my guess.
Just misplaced.
Maybe not even misplaced. People know where they are, but they were ordered to get rid of them. So an example, I think the original Fallout 2, I could be wrong. Interplay was the publisher for that. And I want to say, I might mess her name up. Rebecca Heinemann. She's a famous in video game programming. and in some cases infamous, although not to her fault. She did I want to say, really bad port of Doom for, I want to say it was like a 3DO or something. I could be
Okay.
wrong. It was one of these PC ports, and it wasn't, and no fault of her own. But anyways, she was given very little amount of time, and it turned out badly. Not her fault. She has also done some incredible programming in the past, but long story short, she came out. It came out recently in the news that she actually has the source code to the first couple Fallouts, I believe. So
there you go.
Because again, these programmers were ordered to get rid of the code, and legally they're all afraid of getting sued. They're talking about intellectual property.
Yep.
So I suspect a lot of source code that's missing is on disks in people's storage or on their
Probably.
shelf, and it's just they're afraid to do anything about
Yeah, I
it.
was just gonna say, you're just waiting for them to admit it. It's like, oh, hey, I actually did keep it, even though you told me not to. Sorry, don't sue me.
I think there's probably a lot. I can't imagine pouring that much energy into it as a programmer and then being told, "Oh, you need to throw source
away.
code," and then
Yeah.
actually do that.
Oh no,
Putting myself in those shoes, there's no. I'd be like, yeah, I got rid of it, and it would just go in a drawer.
I agree.
somewhere. Yeah.
That's why my backup hard drive still has files from my original PC from like 1996 or 97. Like
I got CDs and DVDs.
yeah, I just have files upon
Yeah.
files upon files because I never want to get rid of any of that information. Okay, moving on to this one. I thought was interesting because I never thought that this would come out on a handheld, but Digital Eclipse just recently announced that they're working with Atari to release a new collection, but the collection is focused on the Golden Tee arcade series. Do you remember these Golden Tee arcade games?
I never really got into golf games, but I remember seeing these.
Yeah. Well, what was always interesting to me about these Golden Tee games is because they had the trackball when you were.
They were like bar top a lot of
Yeah,
times, right?
they were bar top, but some of them were full arcades.
Yep.
But what I always loved about it, they had like the giant trackball. I think that you kind of like that's how you hit the ball.
Yeah.
And how you hit it, you know. And there were a number of these that came out. So the arcade classics that they're working on is going to have 8 different golf titles. So if you were a fan of these games in the arcade, this is the collection for you. You're going to get Golden Tee 3D Golf, Golden Tee 97, 98, 99, 2K, and Golden Tee Classic. So, and then there will be 2 non-golf games on it. And I remember one of these. I remember World Class Bowling. Made total sense, right?
Yeah,
with
that makes sense.
And then Shuffle Shot, which I'm assuming is like a shuffleboard kind of game.
See, as a kid, I would have never played these things, but
Yeah.
now I think I could potentially get into Golden Tee Golf.
Yeah, it's called aging.
Yeah, like I could probably get into playing real golf.
Yeah, exactly. I, on the other hand, was like 80 years old when I was like 15. So because my friends and I, like for some odd reason, we were obsessed with PGA Tour 3 on the Sega Genesis, and we played it nonstop. There's no explanation why we played it. We just really loved playing it.
But never wanted to play the real thing.
No. Well, that's not true. In high school, I tried out for the golf team.
Yeah.
And we'll leave it at that.
Okay.
So yeah, no comment. And then this one's a really fun one. I don't know if you saw this, but somebody decided that they were.
See this.
Yeah, somebody decided that it would be a good idea to take AI, specifically ChatGPT, and put it up against an Atari 2600 game called Video Chess, which was created, over 45 years ago. And somehow ChatGPT lost.
So I mean,
I just think
I'm
that's
trying
hysterical.
to put myself in ChatGPT's place, right? I never really. I mean, I know the basic rules of chess, but never really played chess, and I'm not confident that I would beat the Atari.
Okay, well, see, my dad taught me how to play chess when I was a kid, so I used to play chess video games, and on occasion I would win.
So Atari, have you played the Atari one?
I've never played the Atari one. So I don't know if I can.
Now we need to know if you could beat it.
Yeah, I understand that. But you would think that AI would know how to beat a game that came out in 1977.
Yeah, but ChatGPT is like, it's great at making up like fake scripts or art. I'm not necessarily confident that I would think it'd be great at video games.
Yeah.
Am I crazy here?
I don't know. But what's funny about it here is that not only did the Atari beat ChatGPT, but they had the setting on the easiest level.
Mm.
of the game. So we were talking about like very like novice, whatever the novice level is in this game, Atari still beat ChatGPT, which is kind of interesting.
I'm happy about that.
Oh, well, I'm happy about that too. It means
Yeah.
that the AI
Skynet's probably
yeah,
further off than we think.
Skynet's further out. We have a little bit of
A
time.
little bit longer.
Yeah, I think the minute it beats Atari at virtual chess, we're doomed.
Yeah.
That's the line now. That's our red line for the AI apocalypse. So hang on to those Atari 2600s. Okay, and the last two bits of news I wanted to share are more current news, not retro news. Since my last episode, did not talk about the Nintendo Switch 2 launch. I honestly had my doubts about it because I didn't see anything that really was grasping me outside of Mario Kart World. Like Mario Kart World looks really, really fun, but it wasn't enough for me to run out and grab a Switch 2. And I still haven't bought a Switch 2 yet. However, a lot of people ran out and bought a Switch 2. So in the first 4 days, 3.5 million Switch 2 units sold in the first 4 days. Now we're a couple of weeks past that. So it's doing solid sales. But the interesting thing about this, and this is specifically to Japan, that the Switch 2 has already outsold the PS5 Pro, the Xbox Series X and S, their lifetime sales combined.
Wait. The Xbox Series X hasn't sold 3 million units?
In Japan.
In
Japan. I'm talking specifically in Japan. And to be honest, like, I mean, Xbox never does well. Like Microsoft doesn't sell well in Japan. I get it. But the fact that all three of those combined it's just an interesting statement 2 weeks into the Switch 2 sales. Now, granted, I thought the Switch 2 was going to do okay. I didn't think it was going to do as well as it has done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just going to continue from there. I'm still hesitant about it just because of the fact that you don't get the physical game anymore.
Wait, what do you mean you don't get the physical game? There's no cartridge slot?
There's a cartridge slot, but the cartridge doesn't. It's like I think they call it like a key card. It's like it gives you access to the game. It doesn't give you the game on the cartridge.
I hate everything about this.
Yeah, I don't like it either.
This is terrible.
Yeah.
So this is the beginning of the end.
Yeah,
and in your game.
Yeah, and Nintendo has already said that if anybody tries to, that they can monitor your Switch 2, and if you try to,
they already shut down our device.
Yeah, if you try to adjust the device, like they will brick it on you. So yeah, again, it's one of those things. Like I'm not comfortable with any of this stuff. I really am not right now, which is why I didn't pull the trigger. Eventually, I'm sure I will add a Switch 2 to my collection, but I need a new Mario platformer, or I think I need a new Zelda game before I run out and grab it.
You know, I really don't like losing physical media.
Same.
You know, I know you were looking at Xbox, and we're still trying to kind of figure out if the next version of Xbox is going to be multi-tiered. Is it going to include a console and a handheld? The
ROG Ally that they just announced.
It's a stepping stone.
It's kind of it seems like it's going to be an in between, but it's a stepping stone. Link wants to join the podcast. So hey buddy, maybe they'll hear you purr. But yeah, like the Ally is going to be like a handheld Windows run. It's basically their answer to the Switch right now, between the Switch, the PS Portal, and the all these other. But
the only Xbox games that'll play on it are games that are also Xbox and PC. There's a PC version.
There has to be a PC version.
Probably. I don't know what percentage. A lot of it.
Oh no, I mean, and that's the biggest problem with it. I mean, it's gonna be a limited library for Xbox games, but a lot of Xbox games are available on PC now.
It's basically, from the looks of it, a competitor more so to the Steam Deck.
Yes,
and
that's what I think too.
Offering a few Xbox games, but here's the thing: those Xbox games are probably also on Steam. Would be my guess.
Oh yeah, wouldn't surprise me.
Except for maybe some first-party Microsoft stuff.
I'm waiting for them. Like, I don't know what's going on with Halo, because Halo was their bread and butter, and like they've been just like that. Halo series is just non-existent now.
That is kind of weird. But
Yeah, I find that
Microsoft
very, very
has
weird.
a habit of just ruining IPs. They've bought so much, and
That's
they
true.
just let it go to nowhere.
Yeah, but to me, Halo is the most egregious because Halo put them on the map.
True.
Like, Halo literally put the Xbox on the map way back when.
I mean, a lesser game, but also I think equally important early in Microsoft's development in the console realm was Fable.
Fable.
Right?
I have all 3 of them and haven't played them yet.
And oh really?
Yes,
Oh,
I have them all.
that's surprising. Yeah.
I know. I missed it at the time. I was playing a lot of wrestling games on the PS2 back then.
Okay.
Because I missed out on all my GameCube games back then too, like Luigi's Mansion and all that. Like I never played any of those because I was too busy with the PlayStation 2.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was a weird time. It was
here's a thought, like that Diablo 3 box again.
Yeah.
Bring it up. So, what do you think? It'd be an interesting test to see if, going back to the whole physical media thing, wouldn't it be interesting if some of these independent game developers that are releasing exclusively digitally would release a couple games maybe in boxes this size, maybe full size, like old style PC boxes with a game on an SD card? Because almost every computer is an SD card reader.
Yep.
Right? And I get that it's optical, as a lot of people don't have optical drives anymore. And just use that format to release games, so it'd come with a digital key and the little SD card. It'd be interesting to see, because I think that this next generation coming up does have the interest in collecting things.
Yeah, I think we may start to see
like with maps and actual manuals and those little feelies like coins and amulets.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if some of them start doing that, because to me, physical is starting to come back with the younger generation. Mm-hmm. But again, it's a cost issue too. You have to think about that.
SD cards don't cost hardly anything anymore.
No, they don't. No, they don't. But you're talking about putting it out with a box and all the other and the maps and all the all the printed material.
Limited run games, seem to do pretty well.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like places like limited run games and like Digital Eclipse, like I just talked about with Golden Tee. Like I can see not Digital Eclipse, but other sites that do it, like Castlemania game.
Yep.
Yeah, like there are a lot of sites that do it, but I don't know if there'll ever be like that wide broad appeal that used to exist, because that was the only way you could get a game. Mm-hmm. So it'll probably be like these niche kind of things where it's like, somebody will release like a limited edition, 5,000 copies of this type of thing. It happens like what was it that recently came out? Power Rangers Readers Rewind. There was a new like beat 'em up game, and it came out digitally last year. But I think Limited Run was offering a physical copy that still isn't. I don't think is out yet. So that's the other thing too. It's
they have problems with that.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. It's like, you can get a digital copy now, or you can wait for the physical one. I think I did that with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles when they released the new game for that, Shredder's Revenge. Mm-hmm. I ordered a physical copy. All my friends got the digital one, and they played through it before I ever got my physical copy. But I was very steadfast. It's like, I want the physical copy.
Yeah.
So, but that's it. Yeah. So timing, the timing would you would have to line up the timing too. Like if you want to release it digitally, you have to be prepared for the physical to be at the same time. Otherwise, it's too easy to just click a button and download a game now.
I have one alibi for purchases.
Yes.
I did, going back to my friend Bastion, I found on Facebook Marketplace, someone was selling a bunch of big box PC games, probably 100, 150 of them or so. So I have like 2 giant boxes full of big box PC games coming soon.
Oh, nearby?
I think they're out towards Oswego, New York.
Oh, okay.
Out that way, Syracuse, maybe.
All right.
Somewhere in that direction.
That's awesome. Show and tell. We'll have a show and tell in the future.
Yeah.
The Retro Gamers Podcast is brought to you by Old School Gamer Magazine. Sign up for as little as $20 per year for 6 issues that include feature articles, interviews with retro programmers, new and old product reviews, and more. If you look carefully, you'll even see an article or 2 penned by yours truly. You can head over to oldschoolgamermagazine.com/retrogamerspodcast and sign up so they know where you heard about it. Old School Gamer is dedicated to you, the old school retro gamers, from the arcades to your home. All right, I think it's time to get into our topic for the day. And this was an interesting one because when I brought it up to you, you kind of took a right turn with it. So I'm going to try and do a hybrid with this. And on the heels of talking about the Switch 2 sales, this is what brought this to mind. Between that and the upcoming Grand Theft Auto 6, there's been a lot of talk and grumbling and people taking issue with the fact that Nintendo announced that the games that they were releasing, especially like Mario Kart World, like games were now going to be $80 a piece, right? So that's a significant bump from the $60 people are used to paying for their games. And also before that, Rockstar, and again, this is just a rumor; it hasn't been officially announced from Rockstar, but the rumor from Rockstar for Grand Theft Auto 6, which got pushed out to next year again, is that Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to be $100 when it comes out, which is a significant bump in price from previous games. And the whole idea about game pricing came to mind, and I wanted to do a little bit of a dive into it because it seems like everybody in their mind has had, like, everybody's kind of had a thought where it's like, in my head, when I think of a game price, I always go back to $50. I always go back to 50 because when I was a kid, I remember most games on the shelf, like Nintendo games, because that's where really I was running. I was always running for Nintendo games. So, because I had an NES. And NES games to me, when they first came out, tended to be around that $50 range. And I vaguely carried that thought all the way through the Super Nintendo and the Genesis. I always thought that these games were $50, $50, $50. I remember Nintendo 64 costing more, but PlayStation I always thought was $50 too. And then eventually we had a jump to 60. But going back and doing research on it, it did remind me that there were a lot of games that came out in the 90s. More so in the 90s than the 80s. In the 80s, to me, I think like $50 was a jump for NES games because Atari games I don't think were $50 when they came out. A lot of the prices I saw for that were like $30, maybe $40.
It depends on the era, right? So if
True.
you're talking 1983, towards the
crash.
The crash.
Yeah.
I mean, I was buying Atari games. They couldn't give them away.
So no, I know they were like
was
$5.
Buying them for $5 with a $5 rebate.
Yeah.
They were just hoping that you'd forget to do the rebate. So, but if you go back before the crash, if you go back to 1980, 1979, and even 1981, early 82, there were a lot of games in the $40, $50 range. And if you go to the computer, for sure, a lot of games in the $50 range. And part of the reason was, and I don't want to jump the gun on this, is when you're talking about games on read-only memory chips on cartridges, and the further back you go, like those cartridges, that ROM, that memory was very expensive.
Yep.
And so you had to be very careful that you didn't produce more cartridges than you could sell. And so you'd have to really do your market research.
Yep.
You'd have to really hope that you get positive reviews. This is why there was so much angst between companies producing games and the magazines, right? Because a bad review in a gaming magazine could cost you your company.
Yeah.
If you really have like a huge game like E.T. or something coming out, and you think that you're going to sell, like I think they made enough ET cartridges. They made more than there were 2600.
They made more ET games than there were unit consoles sold.
Right.
Because they were anticipating that people would buy consoles just for that game.
A console that at that point was already like 6 years old.
Yeah.
Which makes no sense. So, but back to the cost of those cartridges was very expensive, and even on a computer games on discs, all the printing of the manuals, it was very expensive.
Yeah.
And then you also got, how many copies are you going to be able to sell?
Right.
So you would have to charge a lot more, because some of those games that are just like, tip of the spear games in computing, because I'm more computer than console.
Yeah.
Like especially RPGs like early Wizardries, the Ultimas, the Might and Magics. They're huge games that sold 200,000 copies.
Yeah.
In its lifetime, the early ones, the
Yeah.
1, 2, and 3. And so, yeah, they're going to charge $60 in 1981, 82, 83, 84 money. And that's way more than $80 today.
Oh yeah, no question about that. And that also, like when you were talking about buying, like creating limited supply because of the risk involved with it, that was also
especially for cartridges.
Especially for cartridges, I think that was also one of the main reasons why Nintendo had their reputation of being so controlling over their library, because retailers used to sweat over how many games they were going to get, and it would be a direct thing from Nintendo, because they would they would order the games and they'd be like, well, we want 20 copies of Super Mario Brothers, for example. We want 20 copies for the shelf. And Nintendo would turn around and tell them, okay, great, you're getting 4. And that's all they would get.
Yep.
And Nintendo had that stranglehold when the NES came out because of the damage that the crash did. You know, there was a lot at risk at the time, because it's like if they made too many games and they couldn't sell them, I go, that would have destroyed them too. So like, you know, there was like a bit of a justification for what they were doing, because they wanted to make sure. It's like,
did they have to get the cartridges from Nintendo as well?
Yeah, it was
so with Atari, they didn't have to do that, because it was off-the-shelf technology. Anybody can make an Atari cartridge.
Oh yeah, no, and that's why they were like
no lockout chips, nothing. Yep.
Well, that's why, like, one of the things I talked about on the last episode with Charlie, we were talking about Pac-Man games, right? Because we were doing the 45th Pac-Man, and we were talking about all the Pac-Man clones that came out.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, any company would just be like, "Oh, I'm going to jump on this. Here, I'll take the code, and I'm going to tweak these little things, and I'm going to change the ghost into something else, and there, hey, new game."
And sometimes it ended up in a better game.
Sometimes it did,
but oftentimes it's very derivative.
Yeah, exactly. It was just a cat, it was a cash cow. It's like, how can I make money off of this really popular game? But like I said, like with Nintendo, like controlling that was very important to them, because they didn't want to fail. So, and again, controlling the output. Like, we're going to make X number of games so that we can, potentially mitigate failure if we do fail to sell these units. But getting back to the pricing aspect of it, but even with that, like Nintendo games, I always remember like $50 to me was always like the most. It was when the Super Nintendo and the Genesis came out, but more the Super Nintendo, where prices suddenly started jumping. And Genesis and Sega, I think, to stay competitive, I feel like they purposely tried to keep the numbers lower. So that they can compete with Nintendo, who at that point, when the Super Nintendo came out, were they were the big, it was their yard. Anybody else trying to get into their yard, like, because they had the lion's share of the video game industry in their pocket, like, because TurboGrafx wasn't really competing. In the US, the Master System wasn't competing, and video game sales in the US were insane. So everybody wanted a piece of that market. But I did like a little dive to see, what games were costing back then, specifically like starting with the Super Nintendo, because the Super Nintendo, again, in my head, because I was still young, so my parents were buying all of my games. So I just, to me, it didn't matter what the games cost. It mattered to them, because it's like, how much are you going to put out for a game? And there were a lot of games that were in that $50 range, which was still kind of the norm. And there were occasionally some that were less. But then there were some where you looked at them. Perfect example would be like a Street Fighter 2. Like when Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat came out on those systems, they were $70 off the shelf, right off the bat. I mean, that's a hefty price to pay for a video game in 1992 or 93. And other games, like other licensed games, like Maximum Carnage, Marvel licensed game, again, $70. NBA Jam, $65. But then Nintendo's own, my cat's gonna keep jumping up and down on this show. Even Nintendo first party games, like Super Metroid, was $60 when it came out. They still tacked on an extra $10 to something like that. So, and I think Mario Paint also. Now, granted, Mario Paint came with
the mouse and a mouse pad.
Yeah, it came with a mouse and a mouse pad, so there was a reason for that, I think, to be over $50. Made sense. The Genesis didn't have as many games that were like Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter were more expensive on the Genesis as well, and I think they also hit that $70 mark. But Streets of Rage 2 was $65. But again, most of their games still seem to hover around the 50. And I got to put the cat down because when I was doing my research, I went back to, and I've had this on the show before. I went back to my Sears wish book from 1992. I bought this off of eBay. I did not keep this catalog for 33 years. I bought this off of eBay one day when I was feeling nostalgic, and I wanted to see what it cost. Oh, look, here's the automatic chess sets. I had one of these automatic chess sets when I was a kid. Also, one of the ways I kept playing chess. So,
such a nerd.
Yes, I was a nerd. Thankfully, my school didn't have a chess club. Otherwise, they would have just perpetuated it more. But anyway, going back to the Wish Book in 1992 kind of also showed what games for the Super Nintendo and Genesis were going for, aside from the ones that I brought up. And again, now at this point, even NES games at this point were, they were all cheaper because of Super Nintendo. But like the TurboGrafx 16 in 92, if you wanted a TurboGrafx 16 game, Prince of Persia was $60. Addams Family was $60. Night Creatures was $60. So not all the games, all the games were more than 50. And then when you got to Genesis, again, with Genesis, a lot of the stuff did stick around the $50 mark. Some of them they slapped an extra $5 on. But when you got to, again, sports games, Bulls versus Lakers was $55. MLBPA baseball was $65. So they were already starting to, charge for the,
But you're adjusting for, this is 1992.
This is 92.
So adjusted for inflation, $60.
Yep.
What are we looking at here? Let me look it up real quick on my phone.
Like Where in Time is
$140 in today's money.
$140. So imagine paying, and here's a perfect example. Imagine paying $140 today for Wheel of Fortune.
No.
Because it was $60 on the Genesis.
And this brings up a good point that
Yeah.
it's easy to look at these prices, and what this isn't showing, and this is the gamer that I was in 1992.
Yep.
I shopped exclusively out of this box next to the rack.
Yep.
Where they would put these games in a year or two.
Yeah. Yeah, you were always a year behind.
At least.
Yeah, because you didn't want to pay.
I didn't have $140 to pay for a new game.
No. And again, a lot of the Super Nintendo games were sick. Like looking at this catalog, unless it was just Sears that charged more, which I don't think it was. Yeah. But I can rattle off really quickly: Addams Family, Castlevania 4, Contra 3, Dino City, Paperboy 2, Final. Those were all $60. Final Fantasy 2 was $70. So again, you were paying extra for certain games. You did get Wheel of Fortune for $55 on the Super Nintendo instead of $60 on the Genesis. So there's Super Nintendo One. But just an example of even back then, games were going for more than $50. And again, this isn't any type of PSA. I should have said this earlier. This isn't any type of PSA to justify the new prices for games, because we'll get to that part of the discussion in a minute, because there's clearly a big difference between
1992 and 2025,
and we'll get to that. But when we got to the N64, this is when I think it started to get a little bit crazy, because I remember personally going to get an N64. I got it for my birthday. I was really, really happy to get it. And when I went to get it at the store, I got both launch games with it, or two of the launch games at the time. I don't remember if there were more than two. I thought these were the only two, but there might have been more. I can't remember off the top of my head. But I bought Super Mario 64 and I bought Pilot Wings 64. And I remember buying them because they were, like, Super Mario 64 was $60 for the N64, and I think Pilot Wings was also $60. So on top of paying $250 or $300 for the system, there's another $120 just for the two launch games with it. Because N64 did not come with a packing game. It was just, you got the console. And that was another thing too. Like, when you would get a console before that, like normally you got a packing game with it.
Mm-hmm.
Super Mario World came with Super Nintendo. Super Mario Brothers came with NES. Altered Beast came with Sega Genesis, and then eventually Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah.
Which so Nintendo went into new territory here where they're like, no, you know what? You're gonna buy the game separately because if you want the console, we know you have to buy a game.
Mm-hmm.
And they played off of that. But then as other games came out for it, Star Wars Shadow of the Empire, $70. Wave Race 64, $70. GoldenEye, which is, arguably one of the best games ever, made for the N64, $70. So you were never really paying, especially for this N64. I remember that clearly. Like $50 for the N60 for an N64 game was not commonplace. And granted, in '96, obviously adjusted for inflation would be less. But,
right.
But I think where the change started to happen with the prices and where we kind of went back for a while on that $50 is with the PlayStation and the Saturn when things became more CD based.
Right.
Because it cost less to produce them.
Significantly
less. So then Sony, right out of the gate, was able to compete with your Nintendos and your Segas because here's a game, it's on disc, it's $50. Yeah. And Saturn tried to do the same thing, did not do well, unfortunately. But
in the US,
yes. But Sony hit the mother load with the PlayStation. And granted, a lot of it always has to do with if you have quality games. But obviously, if they're more affordable, they're more enticing as well.
And there were the sheer quantity of games guaranteed that you didn't have to wait as long in some cases for the game to come down in price significantly.
True.
Whereas in N64, there were fewer games, particularly in the first year or two.
Oh, yeah.
So those games, the prices stayed pretty stable longer, in my memory.
Well, Nintendo's never won, even to today.
Particularly their first-party stuff.
Yeah, their first-party stuff, they don't drop the prices. No. And when they do, they usually don't drop them that much.
No.
So, but like you said, the PlayStation 1, I think, at the end of the day, had something like 6,000 or 8,000.
Yeah, insane
amount of games. And again, and if it costs less to make them, it's like you had a huge library, and more companies were willing to take the risk and create a game because it costs less to make.
It'd be interesting to find this. I don't know how you'd find the stat. Like at the end of right before the PS2 came out and right before the GameCube came out, how many games did the average N64 owner have, and how many games did the average PlayStation owner have? I'm willing to bet that the PlayStation owner had double the games.
Yes, if I was in that test group, that is absolutely correct. And then don't get me wrong, I loved my N64 and I played my N64 to death. It was the multiplayer system of that generation, and my friends and I were at the perfect age to play all of those games. So your Mario Karts, all of your wrestling games, like the 4-player aspect of it was just gold for us.
As an RPG gamer, I was so uninterested in N64, plus the lack of assets that game designers had in the limited amount of space on a cartridge. Mm-hmm. There are rare exceptions, like Resident Evil. They did magic to make that
get that on there. I know.
But for the most part, the graphics on an N64 in some ways were more impressive, but in other ways definitely not, just because they didn't have the amount of space for all those textures to be stored that you would on a CD or multiple CDs.
Yes.
So in some
and that's
ways,
the other thing
they looked richer on the PlayStation. A weaker system, technically.
Well, and I was just going to say, and you brought up something interesting, and that was the other thing, too, with the PlayStation, is that your game did not have to fit on one disc. You can make a sprawling game that was 2, 3, 4 discs, like your Final Fantasies.
Yep.
And you would still sell it for an affordable price because, again, it didn't cost that much to produce the disc.
Yep.
So, but then after the N64, everything seemed to kind of level off because CD became the way to go. Like PS2, Xbox, even Dreamcast, like games settled down for a while at $50 again.
Yep.
And that's why I feel like $50 always seems to be that sweet spot that most retro gamers remember. Like to me, 50 is that magic number. And in my head, I always lament when I buy a game. I'm like, oh, why isn't it $50? Because that's what I'm used to. Because from the '80s with the NES to the 2000s with PS2 and Xbox, and even GameCube. I think GameCube, even the games were like $50. The Dreamcast was $50, I think, for a lot of them too, in my recollection. Um, and all the way even to the 360 and the PS3.
Mm-hmm.
Like all my 360 games, I remember all my 360 games that I purchased. I remember being $50. Maybe I'm wrong, because I did find a little. I didn't do that much research that far in advance. Like there were some that were 60. Like if you bought Call of Duty, those were 60. Um, some of the wrestling games were 60. Gears of War were 60. Those weren't the games I was playing at the time. I don't remember paying $60 for a lot of games on the 360. But that's when they started to transition, where it's like, here are a few games that are 60, and then when we got to PS4, Xbox One, then 60 was just the norm. It's like, all right, we're up at $10, see how people feel.
So I feel like also for a lot of this, it was that 50 or 60 or whatever that number we're talking about is like the initial release ceiling.
Yes.
When Xbox Live came out, it kind of revolutionized the pricing of games.
Yes.
And it really paved the way for digital distribution.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say they were the first, but it was such a big hit.
Oh, yeah.
So like the idea that to get a engrossing or unique or, like an A+ game requires $60 kind of went out the window.
Yeah.
Particularly if you didn't have to have the physical copy in your hands. So yeah, I think it was like by the time PS3, Xbox Live came around, 60 is still the norm probably at that point. But there was still, for people on a budget like myself, between the digital distribution and then the flip side of just being the quantity of games that were being released on discs, which were relatively cheap to produce, you didn't have to wait long for that 60 to come down.
No, you definitely did not. In fact, and that always became like kind of the
sports games were a joke.
Oh yeah,
wait a year and they're like nothing.
I was gonna say that because they kept churning them out every year at that point.
Because you want the new roster. Right?
Yeah, you want the new. It was all about you were paying another $60 for a new roster. But that also became like the running joke for me for a while too with my friends, because they would all be like, "Oh, you're gonna get this," like any game that came out towards the fall. Mm-hmm. My response would always be, "I'll wait till Black Friday." Because when Black Friday came around, even if the game came out like 3 weeks before Black Friday, there was going to be a sale on it, and it was going to be $10 or $20 cheaper.
Yep.
And so I would stock up on Black Friday. I would just buy like 10 games on Black Friday because they were all, in a lot of cases, half price or more for some of them.
Yep.
And it was great.
If you could wait.
It was all about waiting.
It was affordable.
Yes.
A much more affordable hobby than people remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
But now we get to today, right? We get to today. Mario Kart World is $80, right? And here's where it becomes the issue of, is it worth $80 to buy a game? Now, back when we bought cartridges for $80, there's a big difference, because you got the cartridge, you got the box, you got the manual. Everything was physically done.
You owned it. It was
you owned it
in your
outright.
Hands. Yep.
Right. Now, and with the Switch 2, you get it if you buy a physical copy. And this has been happening with the Switch and the PS5 and some games too, where it's like you buy the game, they give you a code, and then you just go online and download it. Same thing with now the Switch 2, you get a key card. The key card gives you access to download it. So you're not getting the physical data anymore. You're just getting access to it online.
Yep.
Which, now when you compare that to what you used to pay for a game, does it make sense for them to raise the price for a game? Now you're paying $80 just for access to a code that's sitting on a server somewhere.
So, Anthony, I think it comes down to supply and demand, right?
Yep.
Free market capitalism. Nintendo's done the math, and they know what the quality of their new Mario Kart game is. By all accounts, it's very good. They know that people will pay $80, and I'm willing to bet that you won't see it dip below 60 ever.
Probably no. I wouldn't doubt that at all. But but the idea,
But the fact that you don't own it is
that
very, very frustrating.
yeah, that's the part that worries me. It's the reason why I've always been, even when Xbox Live and stuff
Mhm.
came out and people were like, "Oh, this is really cool. You can just download the game." I would always be like, "I'm going to go buy it."
Yeah.
I don't mind getting up and switching a disc in my game in my console so I can play the game.
You're assuming that that digital distribution store or Connect Online is always going to be there.
Hmm.
That the company was always going to be there. Nintendo will probably always be there. Microsoft might not, or this version of the store might not. And then
Right.
now you've lost access to this digital only product that you didn't
Yeah.
really own if you look at the fine print when you purchased it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's funny too because like one of the reasons why, I mean, granted, I collect all my systems.
Mm-hmm.
One of the main reasons why I'll never get rid of my Xbox 360 is because on my Xbox 360 I have X-Men the arcade game
Mm.
and the Simpsons arcade game. And those two games, I think I have the Simpsons one. I'm pretty sure I do. But those two games were only released on the 360 console. It may have been PS3, like that era.
Mm-hmm.
It was only released on those consoles and they were never released again.
Right.
So as long as they live on my console, I will never get rid of that console because I love those games. And it's the only version of it I have for an actual console.
I collect vintage consoles like
Yeah.
you. I really have a soft spot for the 3DO. That'd be an interesting topic someday.
Oh, yeah.
And imagine an alternate reality where the 3DO had all done digital distribution somehow in 1993 or whatever it came out in
Yeah.
94. That company is gone. Like
Mhm.
you'd have no access to those games.
Yep.
Thankfully, it didn't. They everything was released on CDs, and
Yeah.
I am happy to play my games today. Slight segue. One of the best versions of Wolfenstein 3D is on the 3D.
Is on the 3DO.
Yeah, 100%. So I have deep concerns about the direction I'm seeing things going. I'm concerned that Xbox, whatever it is they end up doing when they transition away from Series X, that optical drives won't be an option. It sounds like Nintendo, this is their direction. It's gonna be real interesting to see what Sony does with the PlayStation. Yeah, I'm definitely concerned about this. If you're going to charge $80, at least I'd want to know that I have the game forever.
Yeah. Well, I remember. I kind of vaguely remember too when the PlayStation 5 was in development. There was talk of it not having. Uh, I thought there was talk originally of it not
There
having
was.
a physical drive. But then the upper kind of pushed them to do it, and then obviously they did a digital version, a physical version, and Xbox did the same. Well,
Xbox
Xbox did
was
the same-
different.
yeah.
Xbox's big push that they were trying to make was required always on the internet for it to work. So in other words,
Yeah.
if you weren't connected to the internet, your game couldn't load, couldn't
Yeah.
play. Which, again, if Microsoft were shut down the services, now suddenly, even though you have all the games on disk, it wouldn't work. That's not ideal for video game preservation
Right.
and enjoyment of games in the future, regardless of what happens to Microsoft's interests in console gaming. This is not good for consumers in the long run, and certainly not good for collectors.
Yeah, well, definitely not good for collectors, and won't be good for consumers either. Because, like you said, one day it'll be like, oh, hey, we're shutting this down.
Yep.
We hope you enjoyed playing those games.
There's a lot of money in reissuing the same game over and
Well,
over.
Nintendo knows that.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've purchased, a Super Mario Brothers game and the same one on different.
Over and over.
Yeah, so there's definitely and that this will bring us into, I think we can segue into the other part of this discussion, because instead of buying a game over and over again, like you were talking earlier about,
So
like
you're talking big dollars here.
You're talking big
Some of
dollars.
us didn't have big dollars, Anthony.
Yeah, I know, John. So then what did people who did not have big dollars do?
Well, they would take those big dollars and instead of putting it into a bunch of games in a relatively inexpensive console, they'd buy a ridiculously expensive computer and then have no money left over for games.
Yes.
Which is what my family did, because it made a lot more sense to them to buy a computer than video game consoles.
Right.
I mean, we did have an Atari 2600, and we eventually had an NES, but that was, again, much later. Most of the gaming that I did through high school was on a computer, and it's this book that he bought is hilarious because we bought our Packard Bell. I want to say it was in 1992,
Which is what this book is.
which is what this book is. And
don't lose my half off the Sears photo suite studio.
Yeah, you
I
should.
don't want to. Look, you can get half off. You can get half off your Christmas photos. 53 portraits for $10.95.
So I actually have repurchased this computer. Let's see.
On the right side.
Oh yeah,
down here.
Down here. I'm not doing
No,
this right.
Yeah,
right
here.
there,
I got it.
right
I
where
got
my
it.
hand
I will
is.
Vanna White this for you.
All right, so right here, this computer. Thank you for Vanna White. You're very good at this. It all told with the monitor, with the printer, with the computer. I think it was in 1992 money. I can't remember what it was, like $2,000, over $2,000.
Yeah, something about two.
Adjust for inflation, over $5,000 today on this very, very entry level computer.
That is hefty.
It was
That
a
is
very
hefty.
low end 46, but it had a VGA display. It had no sound card, just PC beeper.
For later.
Oh yeah, there you go. It had a 5 1/4 floppy drive, a 3.5-inch floppy drive, and I want to say it was like 120 megabyte hard drive, which at the time seemed like more than enough. So, what does a kid do that has no access to games? Well, it did have a modem, a very, very slow modem. So, I discovered this thing called bulletin board systems, which was like a proto internet. So people would set up computers with software that would run a very loose equivalent of a web page kind of, but essentially people could dial into the computer and there would be a digital bulletin board. You could leave messages. There could be a means of sharing information, sharing software. What kind of software would you share?
You would share games, of course.
You would share shareware.
Shareware.
You would share shareware. You would share public domain software, and you would.
By the way, this is way before Napster.
We're talking shareware started like in 1982, 83.
Yeah.
So shareware, public domain, and freeware, and those are all three different things. I know they sound very similar. So to kind of, I don't want to have to reinvent the wheel here, so I'm just going to read out this explanation. Freeware is free to use without restrictions. But the copyright remains with the developer, and it may have specific usage terms. Public domain software has no copyright restrictions and can be used freely, modified, and distributed. Shareware is free for a trial period, but requires payment for continued use. And oftentimes, shareware would come with part of the software. You say, well, that sounds like a demo, and it kind of is a demo. But in my experience, when it comes to games, that's what we're talking about here today, shareware was a little more full-featured than a demo. So it may have full functionality of the software in a sense that you could network and play other people who had that other copy of shareware, like you could do with Wolfenstein 3D or Doom. Oftentimes it had like a whole chapter. So say a game might be released in 3 chapters. So it might be 24 levels or whatever. You might get the first 8 levels. Whereas nowadays you get a demo, it's usually time limited or it has like 1 level. Very simple, gives you a taste of the game and that's it. Shareware was amazing because you got a good chunk of that game and it was completely free. Now, I would get my shareware through BBSs, but that wasn't the only way we were getting shareware, particularly in the 80s.
BBS would be the bulletin board system.
The bulletin board system. So shareware, freeware, and public domain, and then there's wares, but we won't talk about wares. That's pirated software. There are also BBSs that had pirated software, which I never downloaded. But back to shareware, because that's what we're going to talk about briefly today. For shareware in the 80s, when those games are costing $60, computer games as well.
Yes.
It was amazing to think that you could get a quality game, particularly as you got into the early 90s with companies like Apogee and Epic. And then even some of the bigger companies like Interplay would release some of their games. Like Descent was a huge hit as a shareware game. Descent was 3D, like completely free in space, like you're the space shooter. You can kind of move around. It was a phenomenal game. One of the first games I played in virtual reality.
Oh, nice.
I was at a CompUSA and they were selling a virtual reality with shutter glasses, where basically you would see one eye would see the slightly different image, but it was happening the refresh rate so fast you didn't realize that's what was happening, and it would give you the effect of 3D. And I remember playing Descent and like peeking over the edge and getting a feeling of vertigo. This was like 1994. It was amazing. That never took off, of course, back then. Now
Of course not.
kind of took off. But anyway, back to the shareware. There were some big hits that started out on shareware or were very popular in shareware. Sometimes it was a taste of the game. Sometimes it was holiday themed. So you could get the Christmas version of Lemmings, for instance, would be free. I mean,
Nice.
and that's kind of bridging between freeware and shareware.
Yeah.
But there were versions of Worms and whatnot. And some of these companies started in shareware, like id Software came out of Apogee. So shareware to me, for someone on a budget, was amazing because there were, particularly in certain genres like platformers on the PC, that when VGA graphics first started taking hold, because the PC was, if I'm going to be honest, it was one of the worst gaming platforms. As expensive as they were, that was not an architecture that was intended to play games. It did not push graphics, and really, it was when it got to the 386 level with VGA graphics that they could just essentially brute force. And having 256 colors and the type of graphics that that VGA, the way it displayed graphics, other competing computers could not do. So like the Amiga eventually fell off the map because it could not push 3D games like Doom. It just couldn't. The architecture was completely different, the way it drew graphics, and the PC could just brute force with 386s and 46 CPUs. And overnight, the shareware scene blew up a whole new genre of 3D shooters because of Wolfenstein 3D was really kind of the first. But then there was all these Wolfenstein clones that came out, and they were all shareware to start for the most part. Even some of the heavy hitters from Raven Software, like I want to say Heretic. You ever play Heretic?
I know Heretic.
A lot of fun. Some really high quality games started as shareware, and the PC kind of rode that wave until I want to say the early 2000s. And so when you get this shareware back in the early 90s, if you liked it, there'd be an address or a phone number that you could write in or call. And you get your credit card, your mom's credit card, of course, with her permission, and you'd order the full version. And if you were lucky to get these are pretty uncommon these days. Like this is Duke Nukem 2. Duke Nukem 2 started out as a platformer. Duke Nukem started as a platformer, rather. The second one was a big upgrade from the first one. It had full music and sound effects. And the same producer of Doom's soundtrack did the soundtrack in this. I can't remember his name offhand. Fantastic music, fantastic game.
Yeah.
Then back to the Wolfenstein. There were so many Wolfenstein clones when Wolfenstein came out. This was Blake Stone.
I just love this. Is just pulling out a good old 3.5-inch floppy disk. Here's your game, right here.
Yeah, those discs hold 1.44 megabytes of space.
Copyright 1993.
Yeah. Alien Carnage. The platformers on the PC were really popular, and when VGA came out on computers, one of the things that always amazed me before I had a computer with VGA, because I'd used computers with CGA, which was like 4 colors, which was the typical, or EGA with 16 colors, all the way up to the late 80s, early 90s. Most people, VGA came out in the late 80s, but most people didn't really have it in a home because it was so expensive till the early 90s. And we could never get good platformers on a PC. It just could not do it. The architecture of the PC was not meant. It didn't have bitmap graphics. It was not meant to be a platforming, pixel pushing machine. It was meant to do office work, right? And so to see anything that was remotely like Super Mario Brothers on a PC was thought impossible. So when those things started showing up in shareware, I was just, and usually from Apogee or Epic Games, my mind was blown. Like Commander Keen was one of the first, and that was John Carmack, I think, from id programmed that, if my memory serves me correctly. And that had smooth scrolling, not screen by screen, which we were accustomed to. You get to the end of the screen and it'd flip to a new screen. You see a new screen. Smooth scrolling, like on a Nintendo. To see that on a PC was mind blowing. I'm not going to say that Commander Keen was at the same level as Super Mario Brothers,
Right.
but it was a technological marvel, and it was still, even holds up to this day, as a pretty fun game. And these things all started out as shareware. So even if you were poor, you could still play a ton of. Apogee released dozens.
As I say, as long as you could afford the actual expensive computer first.
Well, the thing is, a lot of people sacrificed by 92, 93. It was pretty common to have them in a home by then. People bought into this idea that, oh, geez, if you have a kid and you want your kid to amount to anything, and the kid would sell this pretty hard too.
Yes.
Like I
was one of those kids.
I need a computer at the home.
Yep.
I need it. This is to make my future. Right?
Yep.
And we talked about this in the past, thanks again, Mom. We convinced our parents. Mom. Yeah. We convinced our parents that this was for our education.
Well, see, I got a PC later than you, and my angle for getting one was because I was starting college. And I basically said, I'm like, I am going to need a computer for college.
Yeah.
And then again, it was still the mid 90s, and like you said, computers were starting to come down in price a tad.
Yeah.
But not much.
Yep.
But even still, I mean, they were super expensive. But it was an investment in the future, because it's like, hey, I remember kids around. This is the way things are going.
Yep.
I was like, I'm not going to sit here and write term papers on a typewriter.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is what people. This is what people. This is what college kids are using now, and that's how I got my computer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, going back to shareware, the thing about shareware that was interesting, it wasn't just the makers of the software that were distributing this stuff. So there were companies that realized they would get in trouble if they took Wolfenstein 3D. Like, here's a company called Gold Medallion Software, and this is it's got Doom on it, the shareware version of Doom. Gold Medallion Software has nothing to do with the making of Doom. And what they did is they probably put this in a little, envelope with their own artwork that resembled in some way Doom, and it's sold at a gas station or at a checkout aisle at a grocery store or Walmart or wherever for maybe $3, whatever they thought they could get away with. And they would have to say on there somewhere that would indicate that this isn't the full version of the game. And on here, sure enough, there would be a way to contact id to get the full version of the game. So they weren't doing anything underhanded per se. They'd make $1, right, for each one of these without having to do anything other than to put the packaging together and distribute it.
Almost, it would be almost like the equivalent of demo discs when demo discs started coming out for a game.
Yep. So there were a lot of companies. Wizard was a big one. And then they started doing this on CDs too. Like you'd see these CDs for sale. 100 arcade games, and you're like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and then you look at the back of it, and you're like, oh, there are actually a handful of games on here that you'll recognize.
Yep.
Not just the ones where it's like, oh, they just made like.
I mean, there are some very small 1-2-man team games that you'd never have.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But like looking at some of these, like I was just gonna say, like, what are the ones that I recognize? And actually, I don't recognize very many of them.
Some of those could have been low end. This is volume 3.
Yeah, this is. I was like,
here's a better example.
Yeah, give me a better one.
Here's a better one.
Here's Gamer Pack CD. And now we're talking about games on here like Mystic Towers, like Wacky Wheels. What year did this come out? There's a game on here called Wordle.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
I wonder if the Wordlers actually found their game from 30-something years ago here.
Gold Medallion Software.
Yeah. Jazz Jackrabbit.
Jazz Jackrabbit was... So we're talking about shareware, obviously the big hitters like Wolfenstein 3D, Doom, AAA games, right?
Yes. Not
Not all shareware games AAA games, but there were some excellent, like Jazz Jackrabbit is the PC's answer to Sonic the Hedgehog. And I'm not going to say it's as good as Sonic the Hedgehog, but I would say objectively it's a B+, if not A- game. It's excellent.
It's like an impressive Sonic clone.
Yeah. Yeah, and the animation, little cartoon stuff, very, very good.
Yeah.
Very high quality. You'd get this CD, like that CD, I'm looking at the list here. Even today, if you threw me in a desert island and gave me this CD, this would give
Entertain you
me,
for a while.
for weeks, months, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
There's dozens of
until you get
great
sick
games.
of Jazz Jackrabbit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's pretty neat. But by the late '90s, early 2000s, this kind of started to wane. I think we went to more of a standard demo model, a lot less impressive stuff being given away by companies for free.
Yeah.
But for a period like early '80s for shareware beyond games in particular, into their, I'd say, late '90s, early 2000s, shareware was pretty amazing. Great way to get software if you were on a budget. So there were options, but the entry level being you have to have access to a multi-$1,000 computer.
Yep, and that's where the hurdle was. That was the biggest
For a
hurdle.
lot of people, it
Yeah,
was
so
impossible.
for a lot of
Yeah.
people it was impossible, or for some people it was just how did you convince your parents to do it?
Yeah.
And for those of you who want to share those types of stories, it's like you can hit us up on social media. That was actually a nice little dive into shareware, because the shareware I always got into was more like later on, when Napster came around, when I remember one called Bear Share.
Talking pirating software.
And that it was the pirating software, right? It was the pirating software that became a thing.
Shareware is a gateway to pirated software for a lot of people, I have to admit.
Until, and then of course, the famous court case when Metallica sued Napster.
Yeah.
Anybody who knows their history. But again, that pirated thing, but it was such I want to say it was a fad, but I mean, people are still pirating stuff to this day. But when it was new, it was like this shiny thing. It's like, wait, what do you mean I can just download my music for nothing? I don't understand this. I got to go buy a CD.
That stuff hit the same time as cable modems, broadband internet.
Yes. So yes, and that was also that was like a sweet spot for that, because it was all of a sudden it wasn't going to take you an hour to download a song. It would take you 2 minutes.
But you'd fill a hard drive pretty quickly. But at the same time, optical discs, like rewritable discs, came down significantly in price.
Yeah, and if you were able to get a rewritable CD-ROM, then
or DVD drive,
drive, which was a little bit later than that. But still, but going back to it, the whole idea was you had to get that. You had to get that computer first. That was the thing with it.
But every genre other than RPGs, that was the one weak spot for shareware. The representation of RPG wasn't as good, but particularly platformers, but even shooters, like Raptor was Epic or Apogee, one of the two. Shooters. They had shooters, pinball games in the early '90s, mostly thanks to Pinball Dreams on the Amiga, but then eventually Epic Pinball was a shareware game. Puzzle games, every genre you could think of was well represented by quality games in the shareware. So if you had no money and you wanted to avoid pirating completely, you still have a really good time.
You still had a library with
on
shareware.
Your PC or your office PC. We didn't even get into that. That's where a lot of gaming happened before IT departments figured out. Hey, wait a minute. There's lock this down.
Yeah, there's solitaire and chess and Minesweeper.
Because you got a network ready.
Yeah.
A lot of people were playing Doom at work.
It's very, very true. It really is. But all right, that was a cool dive into shareware. It's definitely not one I would have been able to carry on my own. So thank you for the expert. And always, I like when you come on and do show and tell for this stuff too. But for those of you guys out there, I would love to hear from you, what your thoughts are on game pricing these days. Do you agree that the amount may not be worth the game because of what you get for it these days, or if you think it's kind of on par for what we were getting before. Would love to hear your thoughts, or have you had any experience with shareware from way back in the day, like John did? I did not. Would love to hear from you, and you guys can find us on Facebook.com/RetroGamersPodcast, on Instagram @RetroGamersPodcast, on Blue Sky also @RetroGamersPodcast, and you can listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. You can watch us on YouTube and Spotify @RetroGamersPodcast, or you can email us at theretrogamers.com. And John, I think that wraps it up for this discussion.
Yeah, if you want to follow my activities online, the only place I really am active these days is on Facebook. I have a user group called NY Retro-Tech Haven, Haven. So feel free to hit up my group and join. And
there's a lot of stuff going on there. There's a lot of like daily posts, and there's a lot of information. I actually learn a lot from that because I lack in the PC knowledge pre 94, 95.
And we're not big gatekeepers. We talk about everything.
Yes.
So a lot of vintage computer stuff, PC, old Atari, Amiga, Commodore computers. But like, there's people that collect. Like, there's one kid in there collects development kits, like console development kits. I will occasionally bring stuff. There's a guy in there that's big into collecting. Him and his husband are big into the VHS scene, and they actually get videos that people have recorded movies off of, like TBS or whatever. And what they do actually is they're pulling out the commercials, and they splice them between movies at VHS copies of movies, and then they go to small theaters in the upper Hudson Valley region, like in Hudson. And they will have these showings. These events will be like food and stuff involved, food trucks, whatever. And so you'll watch in 80s or 90s. I think Supergirl is going to be showed end of the month in Hudson at the local theater there. And it's going to be cool because it's like a VHS, like digitized copy from a VHS with commercials from 80s.
See, I love that idea. That is such a brilliant idea because I fish for commercials now on YouTube just to see them because it's just awesome.
They have a mountain of from John Pratt at Capital Region Electronics Recycling. They bought 4 VCRs. That's how I met them. They needed 4 working VCRs because they were going through them. They've developed such a neat process to collecting and actually digitizing and working on this. I want to give them props, but my mind unfortunately is
if you get the information, I can throw it. I can throw it in. I can throw it in the description for the show.
Okay.
But again, hope you enjoyed this episode. This one was actually really fun. I liked the topic. I liked how the two melded together with the pricing and the shareware. It all worked really well. And for those of you out there, we will catch you next time on the Retro Gamers Podcast.